Grace and peace to you from the one who is, and who was, and who is to come. It was a cold November night. After dinner, after we put our son to bed, almost after we had finished catching up on that week's episode of Law and Order SVU, Andrea turned to me and said, "It's time." My heart skipped a beat, and then I felt a surge of energy and a tinge of queasiness as adrenaline rushed into my blood. I peeled myself off the couch, and as I darted from room to room to gather those bags we had packed earlier that week, I was on the phone with all the people who were part of our contingency plans for just that moment. Our friends arrived a few minutes later to stay with our son, and we got in the car and drove into the night. It wasn't long before we were through the doors to the emergency department. We checked in at the desk, and within a couple of minutes, a patient care tech from labor and delivery was taking our information, then wheeling Andrea upstairs while I followed behind. Once we were upstairs, we were surrounded with wires and monitors and questionnaires and exams. They moved us down the hall to a room with more space for hospital staff for when the time came. Then, it was calm. That all changed a few minutes after midnight. What followed was a blur of blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And I wasn't even the one having the baby. Even though our contingency plans unfolded smoothly, even though we were in a hospital surrounded by trained professionals, even though we had done this before, giving birth that night came with pain, with struggle, and with fear. The time I spent at my wife's side in labor just a couple weeks ago reminded me that while that's stressful for Dad, giving birth, even under the best of circumstances, is downright dangerous for Mom and for Baby. With the number of things that need to happen just right for everyone to come through that ordeal safe and sound, and the number of ways things can go wrong, it really is a miracle that any of us are here tonight. Being part of the birth of a child, and just a small part of that, proved to me again that giving birth is a high-risk venture. But when you finally hold the baby in your arms, you truly understand that it's also high reward. Once you fully unwrap Christmas, once you peel away the fond memories, the obligations, even all the theology that surrounds this celebration, you have the story of a child being born. At its heart, Christmas is about the high-risk, high-reward reality of being born. But we're gathered here in this place all together tonight because Christmas is not just the story of any birth. It's the story of God being born as a human like you and like me. It's the story of God's creative, life-giving Word becoming flesh. It's the story of the birth of our Savior. It's also a story that many of us know well, but if we stop and think about it as the story of a birth, of that high-risk proposition, so much of what we remember about the story tells us just how great a risk God took in being born as Jesus. Mary and Joseph are uprooted from their home by powers that will not notice or care they are so near to the birth of their child. The emperor's census forces them to travel on foot or maybe on a pack animal the 80 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Taking on such a journey while being so close to delivering the child adds the risk that something could go wrong from all the stress and strain of that travel. When the couple arrives in Bethlehem, the town is filled with all the other people who have traveled for the census as well, so there's no place in the inn. Mary and Joseph finally find shelter somewhere where people kept livestock. Their surroundings add the risk of illness from being surrounded by farm animals and all their byproducts. And while Bethlehem was the city of Joseph's ancestors, the story doesn't tell us if any of Joseph's family was still living there, and if they were, if Joseph knew any of them. We can't be sure what kind of help Mary and Joseph had as the time to deliver Jesus came near. This adds the risk that there's no one to help if something goes wrong for these first-time parents. After letting us know all about the pain of traveling, the struggle of finding shelter, and the fear of going through this ordeal alone, The gospel describes that high-risk, high-reward birth of the Savior in just 7 words. She gave birth to her firstborn son. As we come together to celebrate Mary giving birth to her firstborn son, our Savior, there are plenty of voices all around us telling us we're supposed to feel jolly and merry and cheerful tonight. I hope and I pray that each and every one of you does feel joy and happiness on this holy night. But I also know that in one way or another, each and every one of us brings our pain, our struggles, and our fear with us here tonight. And it's because we bring these with us here tonight that we need to hear the story of Jesus being born as the story of a Savior who is born right into the midst of our pain, our struggles, and our fear to bring us God's healing, God's grace, and God's love. The story of Jesus being born is the story of a God who takes a high-risk, high-reward approach in choosing to be born like one of us. God could have taken the safe route and kept a healthy distance between God's self and all of our pain, our struggles, and our fear. But God chose the high-risk proposition of being born like one of us, and even of dying like one of us, because God was pursuing the high reward, experiencing life as a human to fully understand what it would take to save us. Sisters and brothers, the good news of great joy for us tonight is that in this high-risk, high-reward venture, the risk is all God's and the reward is all ours. That reward is the birth of a Savior who's the living, breathing, crying, squirming embodiment of that God who is willing to risk everything to enter into our pain, our struggles, and our fear, to bring us God's healing, God's grace, and God's love. Whatever else it is, Christmas is the story of a birth. This story tells us that God is willing to take the risk of being born like one of us because God loves us that much. The story tells us God enters our pain, our struggles, and our fear to bring us God's healing, God's grace, and God's love. This story tells us God takes a high-risk, high-reward approach to redeeming the world, and that because of God's deep love for us, the risk is all God's, and the reward is all ours. Thanks be to God.